A very bright and sunny good afternoon to everyone. Hi, Juanita.
Hi, Mark. How are you? Hi, everyone.
It's great. Another great day. And today we are going to touch on the subject of what are the key roles in estate and succession planning. So, the roles that people always get confused about and say, well, what does an executor do? What does a trustee do? What is an attorney? Guardians? What are all those sort of key roles? But I'm going to take it a bit further, and I'll get you to handle all those ones specifically because they're all very legal-ish, and you're better at that. But also I want to talk about what's the role of the solicitor, the accountant, financial advisor, facilitator, someone like us, and business advisors. What are their roles in regard to the whole estate and succession planning process? So maybe let's kick off on the more hard to understand ones, the difference between an executor and a trustee and so on. So any thoughts on that? Thank you.
Sure do. Lots of thoughts.
Like that's like asking.
We'll start off with the executor. So the executor is the person that you name in your will to administer your estate. And basically they have a threefold job. 3 steps to what they need to do. The first is to identify the assets of the deceased person. And the second step is to pay any liabilities that are either still in the name of the deceased person or that arise in the estate administration. And then the third role is to carry out the wishes of the deceased. So carry out what was left by them in their will and distribute the estate proceeds to the various beneficiaries. So an executor is specifically named in the will document. There can be one, there can be more than one. If there is more than one, they must act jointly. And often you'll see in a will an executor named with a backup, which is always advisable. So if your first executor predeceases you or loses capacity and can't act or has to renounce for any reason, there's a backup. So that's, very in very much of a summary, the role of the executor. It's important to appoint someone that A, you trust, B, that you feel is capable of doing that job, and that's both emotionally and practically, that they have the nous to do it. An executor can do all of the jobs themselves, and how much needs to be done really depends on the estate. Every estate is different, depends, as you can see, what assets and liabilities are in there and how much complication there is. Some executors want to and can do everything themselves. Some don't want to and can't do everything themselves and will instruct a solicitor to assist them with the administration of the estate and an accountant to do tax returns, etc. And it's perfectly okay for an executor to do bits and then engage a solicitor to do the harder bits, maybe dealing with the titles office or superannuation or setting up trusts, that sort of thing. So yeah, each one is different. And I'll probably just point out there that specifically if you have a will, if you don't have a will, there is a different process, as we know, as we've spoken about before. And there is a similar role to the executor, but it's called a different name. And basically that's usually called the administrator of the estate. So if you died with a will, you'll have an executor of your estate. And if you died in intestacy or without a will, you'll have an administrator of your estate. And they will have applied to the court registry to be appointed as administrator of your estate in the absence of a will. So there's a slight differentiation between those 2 terms, but they essentially do the same job.
Yep. You've done a great job. You've nailed the role of the executor. Thank you, Juanita. But I was just going to make a couple of comments, if I may. And you raised good points about always having a backup, always having a plan B, so you've always got a reserve or a spare. I've always said too, I think it's important to have 2 executors at least. One who understands the family dynamics, the children, and is the empathetic executor to make sure the real wants and feelings and wishes of mum and dad are taken care of. And the second person should be maybe more emotionally divorced, but much more astute in regard to business issues and so on. So I always use the example, if little Johnny comes and pulls on the first one's heartstrings and says, "Hey, I need a new Ferrari," the second one certainly will be the person that can say, "No, that's not financially viable." And so you've got empathy and you've got financial nous, I guess, is a good way to think about. The other thing I think with executors is if you're going to use children, you use all or you use none. In most cases, I think pulling one child and giving them the role of the executor could be dangerous in regard to if there's any family disputes or antagonism between the children. I think it's important that everyone has that role rather than leave it to one person. But no, you covered executors very well, and
I think as you just mentioned, that's where a lot of families, or a lot of parents in particular, practically have a little bit of thinking to do if they have multiple children. So if you have 3 or 4, 5 children, who you're going to appoint there, and that's where all those points that Mark you just made really come into play. Sometimes there might be an obvious choice that everyone is comfortable with and agrees, but because executors have to act jointly, it's not a great idea to have too many practically. And also it's important that they get on. We've seen situations where there might be 2 children, but they hate each other, and that is a recipe for disaster. Throwing them into to do that executor's role together. So you're better off in that circumstance having someone or some people independent of the children.
Yep. No, absolutely right. And I mean, as early as today, we were talking to a family where, there were 2 kids and they weren't necessarily, those kids won't get on. So, you've got to look at some other way to get around that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The trustee. Juanita, what's a trustee mean?
Yep. So this will be fun. So now we're going to start getting into a bit of little legal terminology here. So probably there's 2 parts to the role we know as trustee that I wanted to address. The first one is I think a lot of people can appreciate or would have heard the word trustee. Probably a really basic example is if you had young children, you might have opened a bank account for them to save some money for them. You would have opened the bank account for them in your name because little children can't open a bank account, but you know that bank account's been maintained and kept purely for the child who is the beneficiary of those proceeds. So that's sort of the concept of being a trustee and managing an asset or managing some cash on behalf of someone. So if we pick that up and plonk it into a will, into our estate law environment, a trustee will usually be someone who is nominated to administer the proceeds or the estate assets on behalf of another person. So it could just be as simple as I want to leave $5,000 to my little niece, and I want Mark, you to be trustee of her bank account until she turns 18, 20, whatever it might be. So obviously Mark in that role as trustee is administering and taking care of that bank account until my niece, the beneficiary, turns at a certain age and can take it herself. There's certain duties. Mark will be breaching the law if he takes any money out for his own purpose, for example. He's got duties to the beneficiary and to carry out his role in proper way, in a legal way, and not misuse his power or his position or the proceeds. So that's sort of a really simple example. If we have a will where we've set up a testamentary trust for asset protection, in particular purposes for the beneficiary, so we might have a majority of the estate assets all falling into this testamentary trust. It could be property, it could be cash, it could be any asset in particular. Then we must nominate a trustee to administer that trust again on behalf of the beneficiaries. Now, if the beneficiary is old enough, they can be the trustee, but as we know, there's reasons why you might want to put someone independent as a trustee. The beneficiary might not be old enough, they might not be good with money. We might want to put some stronger asset protection mechanisms around there. So basically the person who administers day to day the assets that are being held on trust for the benefit of someone else is the trustee. So that's the general concept. And just to be a little nerdy, there's also a technicality, I said not technicality, but a piece of the law that says, we just spoke about executors a moment ago. And obviously when they, as I said, collect all the assets and pay all the liabilities, they'll come to a certain point. It'll just be a minute in the day where all of a sudden all their jobs are done except for distributing the assets to the people, no matter what type of will there is, or even if there wasn't a will. And under the law says that at that very point in time, and the last thing they have to do is to distribute the estates, they actually become a trustee themselves, which makes sense if you think about the process. So a trustee can be nominated specifically, or it also can be a role that the executor turns into as the process of administering the estate goes through.
Yep. Very good. That was very thorough. Thank you, Anita. Very good job. Okay, an attorney.
Oh, an attorney. So, yeah, a lot of people get confused about an executor and an attorney. So the executor is named in your will. Their job starts after you die, and they act pursuant to your will. When we speak about an attorney, we're speaking about the document called the enduring power of attorney. It can also be a general power of attorney, but for these purposes, let's talk about an enduring power of attorney, in which you nominate the person that you want to manage your affairs if you can't because you've lost mental capacity, is the usual reason. Or it might even be practically you're overseas and you need someone to sign something on your behalf. You'll nominate your attorney. So in the enduring power of attorney document, the person that you nominate to carry out those jobs is called the attorney. Now, they will only act in the future while you're still alive and when you lose capacity. And when I say capacity, we're talking about if you are in an accident and you're in hospital and can't make decisions yourself, or for our more elderly people when they start to experience dementia and they need someone to assist them in making decisions, well, not assist them, to make decisions on their behalf. That is the role of the attorney. And the sort of decisions that they will assist with are both personal and health decisions, as well as financial decisions. So personal and health are things like medication, giving instructions to doctors, the like. And financial decisions are things like paying invoices, operating bank accounts, dealing with property, that sort of thing. So that could be the same person or a different person. You can nominate in the document different people, but basically that is the role of the attorney. So you can sort of see that, now I don't need an attorney or an executive. Well, I do need to appoint one, but they're not acting. When I lose capacity, then my attorney will start acting, and then their role stops when I pass away. And after I die, then my executor or my administrator will start acting.
Okay. One more technical term is the guardian, and straight away we would be thinking of children, but tell me, what does a guardian's role in estate planning? What's their key role?
Obviously most important for people with young children, minors, to nominate a guardian for your minor children in your will. So this would be more in the circumstance where both pass away in a common accident, or if the biological parent has predeceased. Probably a bit of a proviso. Ultimately, the guardian of children is, the final say comes down to the family law court, but a nomination of a guardian in your will be followed, substantially followed, unless there is a particular reason why it shouldn't. And that's mainly if that there's safety issues for the children, for example. So we always would recommend that a guardian be nominated for minor children in a couple's will, or an individual with a child, obviously. It doesn't necessarily mean that the child has to live with the guardian. It just means the guardian is in charge of making those important decisions for the child. So it may be that the guardian is nominated, but arrangements are made by that guardian for the child to live in a place that is more appropriate for them, for example, for schooling or for family dynamics.
Okay, well, I just felt we'd gone too far without using the word communication, so I'm just going to throw it in here now.
We've gone 15 minutes. We're halfway through. This is going to be a first.
This is the longest we've ever waited. Communication, and really where I was tying that back, just so I could use the word, was all these roles: executor, trustee, attorney, and guardian. If you don't have a good conversation, good communication with your solicitor, you're not going to understand what it is that you specifically need in your own particular situation. So the next role, and I'm now talking about the practical, the human roles in estate planning, is the role of the solicitor. I'm going to leave that, if I can just put that on ice for a sec, because being a solicitor, this could go on a bit, because you guys do the bulk of the.
What are you going to say, because we like talking about ourselves?
Okay. No, but the bulk of the drafting and the strategizing and all that sort of stuff. So let's touch on the accountant. A lot of people say, okay, is my accountant going to be involved in this process? So practically, it's not like you're sending someone off to see a new accountant. Accountants are very valuable for what's gone before, and copies of documents and all that sort of stuff. So how do you see their role?
Yeah, absolutely. And just before, I've just got a thought before I go on to accountants that I thought would be useful for our listeners to know, is that when we speak about executors and attorneys and guardians, they can all be the same person. So they can all be different. They can all be the same person. So there's no rule that says you need a different person for each one. I thought that might be important practically for people to realise.
Yeah. You don't have to have 4 friends, you only need one.
No, that's right. And so accountants. So we've spoken a lot about how important it is, how advantageous it is when your accountant and your solicitor and your financial planner and your facilitator are all on the same page and all in communication with each other. One of the reasons I've given previously is because you might think that just sounds like lots of dollars, lots of paying professionals to people. But in actual fact, when everyone is working together, it's a lot more efficient, less double up, and actually less dollars, in my opinion. So I always say that is a really good idea, to have everyone communicating. And I suppose a great example of that is that after one passes away, there is an absolute need for an accountant's assistance, at the very least, in doing final tax returns. So if we're administrating someone's estate, ideally we'll know who their accountant is, or find out who their general accountant is, because often it's preferable to involve your accountant with the administration of the estate rather than reinvent the wheel. So if someone's really familiar with your affairs, has all your records to date, etc., it just makes sense to continue using them to assist with the administration of the estate, rather than someone completely new learning everything again, which is also okay, but that kind of continuity can help. So different examples of reasons why as a solicitor we might get accountants involved in the administration of the estate. As I said, at the very least, it would be to make sure that there was the last individual tax return before the deceased passed away is finalised, and then also estate tax return or returns for the estate, which is post-death. So that all needs to be done. An accountant needs to do that. There might be real need for advice for an accountant around capital gains tax matters and tax matters when you're doing when we are doing an estate administration. So there could be particular assets that carry capital gains tax implications or not, and we'll often want to get some advice around an accountant if we're giving if there's different assets to be divvied up in different ways pursuant to the estate. What you wouldn't want to do is just go ahead and make that happen without understanding any capital gains tax implications that might carry with those assets. So that's just another example of why we might need to involve the accountant during that estate administration. And obviously, as you sort of alluded to before, Mark, as part of the estate planning, we're talking about even before one passes away. That's where a lot of the communication happens. So nearly every new estate planning clients we will work with, we'll ask if with their permission if we can contact their accountant, because a lot of clients aren't fully around all their entities and structures and arrows. The accountant is the one that is, and not only can they give us a little picture, a little diagram of different individuals and entities, they can also give us things like copies of trust deeds, constitutions, what else? Potentially
tax returns if there's member loan balances and all those sorts of things.
Financial statements, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll always want to look at the financial statements of entities to see if there's any beneficiary accounts or loans in between entities or that sort of thing. So that is yet another example why it's just ultra important to have the accountant involved in the process. And it just makes for better results for the clients, quite frankly.
Absolutely, and they're needed before and, as you say, many times after someone passes, but certainly in the planning process. Same with financial advisors, understanding if there's life insurances in place, superannuation, retirement benefits, and so on, who are the nominated beneficiaries and so on. So lots of time and advice in regard to taking money out of superannuation funds for people who are close to death and all those sorts of things, tax issues and whatever. The financial advisors are a key part of the whole process, and a lot of times, certainly before in the planning process, it's key to have their input and to understand what it is that they've got in place for their clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So normally I'd go to the accountant for all the things I just mentioned, and as you said, Mark, I'd go ideally straight to the financial planner to get particularly the information around life insurance and superannuation and things that our clients wouldn't know, like taxable and non-taxable components, and who is the owner and the beneficiary of the life insurance policy, and who's nominated on the binding death benefit nomination for the super. So these are the things that the financial planner can just go boom and give us straight away. Yeah,
and raises an interesting point, because a lot of times when I'm taking clients through our process, the facilitation process, and doing all this, you can see up front their brain starts to hurt when they think, wow, how much time, effort, and resources is this going to take? And they're thinking they need to do all this themselves, get all this information to get their estate plan done. But it really is a team effort, and I'm going to come back to the team effort in a minute in regard to the whole facilitation process and the efficiency, the cost efficiency, especially of having a facilitator on board, because it's all about knowing when to get people involved and what they're needed for at the right time, rather than having everyone's engines running at once and just racking up excessive fees for the clients. But by having a team approach, the actual client, we hardly need much of their time at all, because we can go away once they understand the big picture. We can go away and get all that information from the accountant, financial advisor, and so on. I was going to bring up one other role, and that was the business advisor, and certainly with rural families, Juanita, they tend to have a few different business advisors in different forms. Some can be government employees, some can be contracted business advisors, and so on. But to me, the key role of the business advisor is making sure that this is an issue which is identified, succession and estate planning is an issue which is identified and handed on to people, frankly, like ourselves, who this is our specialty and this is what we do. And so it's up to the business advisors in a lot of instances to identify where the issues are. And there may be issues in the family around communication in regard to conflict, which we seem to be seeing more and more of at the moment, conflict between family members and so on. People not knowing where to start, who to talk to, who to trust, all those sorts of things. So the business advisor has a very key role too, and they also, like the accountant, but in a different way, are very much over the finances, the goals, the aspirations, and a lot of the communication and conversations within the family. Your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. So we'll often see, particularly with clients who are rural families or have businesses and business entities, they'll have a business advisor, and they'll have roles such as preparing business plans for the bank or for financiers and for succession planning purposes. And that's probably where the interconnection is really useful. So we might be putting in an estate plan in place for the clients, but there might also be a bit of a succession plan or transition of wealth plan going on at the same time in the now, or while they're alive, and they really have to match up, because we certainly don't want to be leaving things that are ultimately left or gifted or sold in the lifetime.
Sold in the meantime,
yeah. So it's really important, I think, that in that sort of circumstance, the parties are talking to each other to make sure everyone's on the same page. And again, often the business advisor will have these fantastic business plans and projections, etc., that they've prepared, which are really useful in us doing our due diligence and putting together a really comprehensive estate plan going forward.
Yeah. Okay, just going to finish off with, I guess, our role. So let's, enough about everyone else, let's talk about us for a minute. Our role, mine is the facilitator of the whole process, and your role is the key specialist estate and succession planning solicitor. I'm just going to touch a little on what I do first, I guess, which is bring simplicity to the whole process and, as you say, be the ringmaster for all these people that we've talked about, and the, you know, the accountant, the financial advisor, the business advisor, and coordinating to make sure that we use people like you who are actual specialists in this area, because there's plenty of people that can make wills and write up wills, but not many have the experience, the capability, and the knowledge in regard to making sure there's protection around the assets and that everything's done properly, like in the way that's a specialist. And as I said before, with my role, it really is my fundamental role really is one, motivating people to take action to get this stuff done. You know, I've seen too many families fall apart where this hasn't been taken care of. Families have suffered at the other end. Kids never talk to each other again. Cousins never talk to each other. It's, you know, it's just tragic. And so my role is to motivate people to actually take action, and then build the team around our process to make sure we have taken care of, you know, looking at who's the solicitor that's going to be best placed for them. How do we get the accountant through the solicitors, get the accountants involved in the due diligence, the distribution matrix we do, and so on, financial advice, bankers sometimes as well, the business advisors. But the key role is once we've started the process is to make sure that all the technical stuff and all the documentation, the funding, and so on is handled properly and professionally by people, Juanita, such as yourself. And that's the final role, which is the solicitor before it comes back to us to do the ongoing care and maintenance and reviews and make sure that everything's kept up to date. Is that you guys really need to know what you're talking about, don't you? And you know, from meetings that we've had over the months and years, you know, there's a whole lot of trust in your firm, in Murdoch's, in regard to the capability and the specialty that you guys have in regard to estate and succession planning.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I think I just sort of was finishing off like your role there too. I've seen some real benefits in having that facilitator role, because you sort of bring it all together, all the people that we've just spoken about. You're able to provide a bit of independence, because often there's families that just don't know where to start, or there's family dynamics that make it really difficult for things to get moving. So having that independence can really help with difficult conversations, which I know you have a lot of and are good at having, and that assists families in that respect. And probably just finally, just having the ability to carry that on as an ongoing process. So, you know, a lot of, I guess, professional advisors might come in at different times, but having that sort of one point that you know will continue to look after those affairs, and even after one's passed away, is also very useful. As you said, probably the ringmaster of the, well, I wouldn't like to say circus, because we don't want it to be a circus. We want it to be a orderly fashion. So our role we'll see clients who want to start the conversation about their estate planning or their succession planning, and usually they'll come from existing clients or referrers from existing clients we have, or referrals from accountants or financial planners or facilitators, advisors like yourself, Mark. So we'll see clients probably at the start when they really know they want to do something, but they don't really know what that is, or they don't know how to get there, and it's all very confusing. So our role is just to walk through that process with them, try to simplify things as much as possible, and help them get to that end result where they have an estate plan which they're comfortable with. And, you know, estate plan will include a suite of documents ultimately, you know, a will, enduring power of attorney, advanced health directive, super nominations, and there might be ancillary stuff that comes, you know, out of all of that too, dealing with trusts and succession planning during your lifetime, as we've said before. So they're all the things that we we help guide the client to that end result as part of that overall estate plan. And then I'll probably just finally add, after one passes away, the solicitor also, as I said, can help the executor or the administrator in the administration of the deceased estate. And also, if in the unfortunate circumstance there is an estate dispute or if there is any litigation or arguments on foot around the estate, then that's really where you want a solicitor that really knows their stuff to assist and guide you through that process.
Yeah, and we hope those disputes don't happen, but unfortunately they do from time to time. And I think the great value that the role that you guys play as solicitor, yourself, Tom, Leanne, and so on, it's the power and the great questions that you ask that you more than any other solicitors I've seen don't tell people what they need. You really do ask and listen and put the right sort of plans together, because and you give people choices. Tom, you guys always come up with 3 options for clients, and so they have the final say in what level of protection and so on that they want, which is a really valuable thing. Anyway, we never run out of things to talk about, Juanita. So thanks again for your time today. Really valuable conversation, just talking about the roles in estate planning, and we'll see you all in a fortnight. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.